time, and I call, there are little words that people like to use, and I call that arm waving, you know, they're like, oh, this is awesome, and we can be sustainable, and all of that, and, you know, I'm like, okay, those are great words, but let's put like sentences to that, so we can unpack what awesome means, what sustainable means, and so forth. So, this is kind of based on Rob Martin's book. He was our past executive director. So first of all, I guess I should start off. I'm Steve Young. I live in the U.S. in Seattle, and I work for a family foundation called First Fruit. It's actually my wife's parents, so I'm a nepotist. They can't fire me, you know, like it caused scandal and all that. Just kidding. But so I used to be, my background is in home building. I have a degree in architecture. I was a home builder for 10 years. Until the Great Recession in the U.S. I had 100 employees, and we just went to the ground when that happened. So that wasn't fun, but those are life's journeys. I loved Jay's message yesterday when he talked about joy and sorrow, right? And we all experienced that, I think. But so because of that, in 2007, I took my first trip to India, where if anyone knows me, sorry if it's not your country, but if you were to open up my chest, I have a tattoo of India. I don't. You wouldn't be able to see it under the stare anyway, but so I went to India in 2007, and then as I got more involved with the foundation, I'm like, can I work part-time? I'm kind of free for a little bit while I'm shutting down my business, and so here I am 12 years later. So I'm going to be able to give you a little bit of a perspective from a donor. I don't think I fit the typical donor model. I don't wear a blue blazer, gold buttons, you know, and I'm really formal. I like to give people hugs and do, you know, I'm probably a culturally inappropriate traveler. I do these things wrong, but hopefully people forgive me. But so Rob Martin was First Fruit's first executive director in 1990. And so I think in 1990 is when philanthropy was really growing in the U.S., so there were some key foundations. And I mean, for those of you that are younger, there was no internet. Rob will tell stories of when they got a fax machine and could finally communicate, you know. So Rob and some other funders that ran foundations started just traveling and learning and asking questions. So this book is really, we sucked out all of his intellectual knowledge and he put it in this book. So it's just his experiences from 1990 and before of being a funder, and really how do funders and receivers, or you all, how do we interact? It's an awkward. Kimberly in the foyer downstairs. You know, I'm like Kimberly, on your knees and into position if you're going to ask for money. And I think that's where, so often the relationship is the funder doesn't realize your value, and actually sometimes y'all don't do a really good job of helping us to trust you and understand what you're all about. So I'm just going to go through a few things. We've got an older Lazan video, but again, this is from the donor's perspective. So y'all can beat up on me in this or challenge me on anything or say, you people, I hate it when you do this. Because we need to have that dialogue. We need to be real with each other. So I'm horrible with technology too, so I embedded the video and then whatever, so. Does this look familiar, Mitch?
Teaching a seminar on leadership and fundraising for mission, and I was in the midst of a section on American funding practices when a young African Bible school principal who was in the seminar raised his hand to get my attention. And this is what he said.
I get you, Americans. You have a little basket with a name on each one for all your expenses. Only money for that expense goes in, and the only money that comes out is in the name of that expense. We Africans have one big basket. All of our money goes into it, and we meet the expenses out of that one big basket. Let me tell you a story. I was walking down a dusty village road in Kenya towards a site where an orphanage was to be built. The missions pastor had just given $10,000 to the village pastor to cover the orphanage's cost of construction. Now, as they were walking along, an old man came up, begging for money from the village pastor. He took out his new The missions pastor instantly exploded in anger and exclaimed, "How could you do that? That money was for the orphans." The village pastor answered, "I've known this man for years. What would you have me do? How could I not help you? God will provide." What do you say to that? For clearly, they both thought they were in the right.
It was a powerful question, and the answer lies in a few simple words. Not from me, but from voices all over the world.
Okay, I just want to stop it here for a second because this video was done for the Lausanne standards, and I know in my section we talked about uncovering some of the biblical principles, but I'm going to actually turn y'all to the Lausanne principles. I should have printed them out for you, but there's really good stuff in there. So this was done for that.
4 years ago, Atelier
Are the
insisted
Lausanne
on a
standards?
number of missions and funding leaders from Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and Western nations. A meeting was called to seek a solution to the worrisome problems they all were facing in the giving and receiving of God's money for God's work. They sought a process that could help God's servants work together in harmony, no matter what their role in the mission of God's kingdom was. They appointed a committee selected to represent all the factions. This committee commissioned an in-depth survey to seek out the issues that were creating the problem. People from around the world gave their answers. Months were spent understanding their responses and drafting a document that could be helpful. This document was then sent out for comments again around the world, and more than 800 comments were made, making this a more useful document. A few simple words, a new language of engagement emerged in the form of affirmations and agreements for effective giving and receiving of money in mission.
And that's how the Lausanne standards came to be.
The Lausanne standards provide a path for a self-guided dialogue between those who give and those who receive money for God's work. A discussion of respect and giftedness reveals problems. Some may be viewing the donor as a wallet in the pocket of the body of Christ, and in return, donors may use the power they believe comes with money to dominate those who receive money. Solutions are discovered as donors and ministry implementers acknowledge they are called to be wise and gracious stewards, and acknowledge their respect for each other's calling, their unique giftings and personal strengths. In a discussion of cultural differences and interdependency, additional problems are revealed. For starters, they include not understanding the donor's culture and feeling that money is a necessary evil, failing to understand the ministry implementer's culture, seeing them as less than competent. Solutions are found in acknowledging their mutual need for each other as they agree to explore their understanding of the other's cultural concepts. As the ministry implementer and the donor talk about vision and communication, it can reveal other problems. A lack of understanding of vision combined with poor communication about it. Not respecting that the donor too has a vision and calling from God. Solutions are found as each person develops a learner's attitude to failure and success, being true partners as they work towards jointly shared outcomes. In all of their sharing of ministry, trust and accountability is what each person wants. Implementers want trust, while donors want accountability. And this brings the ministry implementer and the donor together. Now they can openly and honestly discuss the challenges they face. And as they openly affirm one another and agree to solutions, they are entering into the communion of giving and receiving as equals at the foot of the cross.
พี่แมนนวลโอเค
Did y'all hear that okay?
ตัวนี้พี่แมนนวลใช่ไหม
Sorry, whenever I plugged in the sound, it shut my computer. So any thoughts or comments on that? Anything, any emotions evoked?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's after lunch, people, so I have this little ditty called All Right People on my Instagram feed, so when I get in there, I'm like, all right, people, I'm having a massage, or scrubbing my head today, whatever. So, no quietness after lunch, please. So, I mean, any emotions, any thoughts? Does it just ring true? That was back in 2011, too.
Yeah, it was good. I like the ending, equality. We're all equal, we're all heading towards the same goal, and to look at each other as equal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I won't be bowing anymore.
You tell it. You just put me straight, please. Yeah.
I'm from Croatia, and as you probably all know, that we had a war in Croatia in the 90s, and I worked on a project of the U.S. government, Project 16 in Croatia, which U.S. government through 16 projects funded psychosocial programs for displaced and refugee people. So I kind of reflect back because everything is so familiar with what was going on in Croatia, and it was very difficult for different American organizations to decide where to put money because there were so many needs.
Right.
And displaced and refugee people, and people from Bosnia and people from Croatia. So the edge.
Great. Anyone else? Any thoughts? So, they talked in the video, and Rob talks in the book about, there's several things that. So unfortunately, some of this and a lot of it falls on y'all's shoulders. Even though we're talking about a communion of giving and receiving, and it is both of us, it's you all that have to develop trust. I can't necessarily do that. I can start to trust you, but there are things you do that build that trust. So how do we do that? So it starts with understanding your purpose. So I think so often when I talk to people and I'm working on a grant proposal, they really don't know how to explain what their purpose is. So that would be one area. And I'm going to move through some of these quickly, and feel free to ask questions if we come along. So there are 3 questions to ask. Understand your purpose. So in understanding your purpose, actually, there are 3 questions you can ask to help you identify that, and it's understanding what God's showing you. Only you all know for your ministry what God is showing you, and I think it's really important that you take the time to reflect and understand what God's showing you in a way that you can talk to the donor easily. And we know you all have a lot of things that you're doing, but what is God showing you? It needs to be clear and concise. And so then, what's He telling you to do about it? You've got to walk the donor along that path, and help them to understand what He's telling you to do about it. Again, you can't use that arm-waving language of, this is awesome. I've been called to Africa to, work with churches to solve the HIV/AIDS crisis. You've got to go deeper than that. You have to help the donor connect with what God has put on your heart. And then, how will I know I'm accomplishing what I've been told to do? So I think in the book, Rob talks about different things that have happened in the donors' minds over the years. And I think probably the last thing we all kind of went through was ROIs and metrics and all of that stuff. And, I want to give y'all permission to slap us back a little bit. Who are people ROIs? I mean, we're spiritual beings, and sometimes you have a hard time measuring, right? And is that even what we should be doing? And I know that gets a little squishy, but again, if you can say what God's called you to do, how you're going to do it, I think the donor's going to enter into that with you, and you're going to start to build trust. And obviously that does just take some time. So when I have pages in the book. I guess I can email out this if y'all like. But one of the things that's important is establishing good character. So when we look at that, it would be things like who knows your work and would serve as a reference. So how are you going to bring that donor into your world to help them and connect with others that are already, we're going to talk about an orbit in a little bit, that are already your friends and they can sell you better than maybe you can sell yourself because they're looking at you from the outside. Can you be trusted? That's going to be the next thing we're going to talk about. Trust is huge. Are you known for your follow-through? Do you actually do what you say you're going to do? So, some of that's going to be like, are you doing your own metrics? Like, I, the donor, shouldn't force you to do that. You should care enough about what you're doing, and all of that's going to build trust with the donor. Are you a learner? Where you can be, what are you learning, and how are you, again, helping others to connect with them? So track record. How, if you're a new organization, this might be a hard one, but most people have been around for a while. But I think even if you're a new organization, you can talk to your track record because you didn't just get into this for fun. I don't think any of you are here because you're like, oh, I want to go save children. That's going to be the funnest thing. And I'm going to deal with, gross things like children being molested and beaten and facing hunger and all of that. So there's going to be something that drew you into the work, and that's going to be the substance of your work. That's like the heartbeat, right? Is your track record. And I think I find over and over when I'm processing grant requests from people, they just don't know how to communicate it, right? Or they've hired a grant writer who has no clue what the organization is. So, any questions so far? I don't want to move through this too quickly, because all of a sudden I'm going to be out of content, and y'all are going to be like, oh my gosh, this looks like a So, okay, this is where we're going to probably sit for the rest of the session, right? Okay, and it's called the orbit. So, in the orbit, we all have a universe we're living in, right? So, I think most people think my universe, when I'm looking for a donor, is the world. And I need to find, as Rob would call, an American or a Westerner that can fund my work, right? But I would challenge y'all. I think you need to really be honest with what your universe is and go after that universe. If you're a local organization, stay local. And I think we're all doing each other a disservice when we think the West has the answer, because actually I think the West has been providing aid for too long, and we've actually just kept the problem going. And it's time for Indians, Filipinos. They have money. The church has money. And we're robbing them of their joy in this communion of giving and receiving when we don't ask. So ask. It's important. So the universe. So you've got all these little dots out here, and you've talked to hundreds of people, and only 3 people maybe like what you have to say, right? So then you have to engage them. You have to build trust with them. Do the things that are going to start to draw them in to your orbit. So the first donors are going to be acquaintances. They're going to be people that are like, sure, I'll give $50 to that, or $25. Maybe it's a one-time gift, and that's all they think, right? But I'll tell you, years ago, I had a friend of mine that wanted to be a missionary to the inner city of Chicago. And he just cold called me, right? That's gutsy, by the way. So he cold called me, and we had a nice talk and everything, and I talked to my wife, or she was on the phone with me, and I said, we usually like to give to people that we know or have a little bit more relationship, right? We don't just cold give usually, especially for a long monthly kind of commitment. And but I said, you know what? Well, let's do it for a year. We're like 16 years later, And you know why? Every month I get a newsletter from him. And that newsletter is simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. It's a story of someone's life transformed. And then he has a little blurb. They were first, he was maybe not even married when he went out. I don't remember. He was married, and now they have like 5 kids. So now the kids are in high school. But that relationship is important. So that's how he took me from an acquaintance. I'm probably more in the friend level still with him. I'm not advocating for his ministry, but I'm definitely a friend, and he's made me feel blessed. In the work that he's doing, all I do is write a check every month. Well, it's actually once a quarter if we're good at it, but but he blessed me back because they took the time to write a monthly newsletter. So I think when we're talking about this orbit, I think the challenge in connecting with donors is it's kind of the last thing y'all want to do, right? It's a pain. Okay, y'all are way food coma. Are you? Is this true? Is like raising money your favorite thing to do? It is? Wow, okay. Everyone? Wow. Is that normal?
Are you in Facebook?
Yeah.
One thing we do is we communicate a different amount of material with each of those groups. So, like, if you're just an acquaintance, we're not going to dump our advocate material on you because it won't mean anything to you. You don't have a relationship with us. So, we're really careful about what we give each of those audiences.
Right. So why don't y'all like fundraising?
It's hard to ask people, especially for me. I mean, we have our own organization, so it's kind of awkward. It'd be easier for me to ask for somebody else's organization.
Okay. So you feel like it's too and you're friends, and you're like they're gonna think, yeah, I'm just a mooch or less of me, or like I'm trying to get to the emotion.
Like my mom would say, don't ever write any of my friends.
Oh, really? Your mom?
Right, like that kind
You're
of.
like, thanks for the vote of confidence. Right.
That was 30 years ago.
Right.
Like that.
Has she let you write them now? Yeah. Well, you were a never mind. Yeah, so.
I think also there's a fear of rejection because of what you're representing, and I think the weight that you are carrying if you're running an organization that I'm going to present the best that I can, representing the needs of all these people, and I think that fear of like, oh, okay, this didn't work, I think it makes it hard to step into that much more.
Yeah, fear of rejection.
Yeah.
That's hard. I mean, I get to write the checks theoretically, right? And the challenge for me is like there are too many people knocking on the door, and I have to say no a lot, which isn't fun either. Anyone else? Yeah.
Just a comment. I cringe, and that's why I'm in this class, by the way, because I'm like here to learn, because I need to be better at this. But we're very fiercely Zimbabwean in our organization, and very little of our funding comes from outside. But as I'm sitting here listening, I'm realizing that actually, without wanting to, it's the friends with their little pieces that are making the thing happen.
Yeah.
And just it's like, oh, that actually is what's happening. And because of that happening over a period of time, and we do have tracking systems in our organization, so we're accountable. Every ton of formula, every diaper that we get, we're accountable for it. And we have people signing for it, so it's built the trust.
Yeah.
So now the friends are advocating for us.
Right.
And I until I saw that, it was like, oh, that's exactly what is happening. So yeah.
It's kind of nice, right? Because when you think of this, does it take any pressure off? Mm-hmm. Like every person you meet doesn't have to be an advocate.
Yeah.
Right? If you can get people to be friends, like if y'all have ever, I don't have a PowerPoint picture of it, but the funding triangle, the top, like the bottom should be your $25 a month or your smaller like friend givers. Or, I mean, and some of those will move to advocates, and maybe they'll become a major donor or be kind of in the middle. But everyone seems to want to come to foundations because they
But
think.
there's a mindset, though. I think
No,
this is
right.
certainly for us in developing country. There's a mindset of I need the big thing. I need this one big thing, this one big
Right, if
donor.
someone could
It's
write
not
me
gonna
a
fix it all.
$30,000
Right,
check, it's
but
going to be
then,
awesome.
we realize that every local person, we need like 1,000 tons of formula a month. So, but every local person that gives 2 is feeding into the 1,000, and we always get the 1,000. So
Yeah.
it's to not despise those small pieces.
Yeah. Well, so how do we move into getting over the fear of rejection and the fear of having fundraising be an important, like our friend here, that it's something that, you know, you might never enjoy it, okay, I'll admit it. I come from the other side, so again, I don't have to raise funds, I get to give it, so that's awesome. But how do we move from being fearful of rejection, of you know, because that's hard. You're already doing hard work, and then you have to be rejected again when you're raising funds. How do you think we start to move beyond that?
Part of it must be confident of your impact, right? Like knowing that you can explain that we are making a difference, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Inviting them to actually own what is not just mine that you are investing in,
Right.
that you are part of this.
Well, that's part of like gaining trust and helping them understand your purpose.
Yeah.
I think the big fact is they're having the trust that what we are doing to explain it.
Yeah.
Why they reject? Because they don't understand the goal and they don't understand the things we are going to do. Local fundraising is always good, like what I am saying in our ministry, like when I am able to explain that what we are going to do, even non-Christian people, they're coming to partner with something. So that's why I think, as you say, that how can we overcome the rejection? The main thing is explain it in a clear picture, and then report back on how you're saying that someone giving you the letter or something. So when you saw there is something happening, that's overcome the rejection. But if nothing happened, even as a foundation, when you give the money and you see, oh, nothing is going on, you will never give the money again. But if you see, oh, there is something happening, then there is no place of rejection. That's I think.
You know what yeah, go ahead.
We would try not to ask for money, but to invite people to get that privilege to be a part of great work, what God is doing through us, and invite to be the part of this work.
So are you, I mean, some people are faith raisers, right? They're going to pray about it and the money comes in, right? Which I think is good. I think when I've challenged some of my friends that are that, I'm like, you're actually robbing people. Like when you ask, it does something for you, but when you have people responding, it's like joyful to see them responding, right? When people get it.
Yeah, for me, it was a mindset shift from knowing that I'm asking them to do something where I'm giving them an opportunity to be involved with something that God is doing, and for them, there's blessings in that. So for people that respond, yes, that's great, because there's going to, you know, God promises blessings. Isaiah 58:10, feed the hungry, help those in trouble, and your light will shine bright, and the darkness around you will become as bright as noonday. So when somebody responds to helping those in need, their lives are transformed as well. And so for me, it flipped quite a while ago, where I'm offering just opportunities to be blessed, and it's not up to me whether you say yes or no. That's up to you and God. And I don't know, but that's more of the fundraising for me.
Right, maybe I mean, you still, you know, if all of y'all are executive directors or in part of this, right? You probably know, like, how much money do I have to raise in a month, or, you know, I got to make payroll for people, because at the end of the day, we all have to eat groceries and live somewhere, right? I mean, those are the, like, basic necessities. So there's a lot of pressure, but yeah, I think when you start to look at it in a positive way versus something that's negative, but really a gift you can give people. Because you know what? if y'all weren't doing the work you're doing, we couldn't give away our money. Like, we couldn't legit give it away to people that we can't trust. So we need people. Like, that's where that communion comes in. We need people doing it, so we're equals. You know, just, yeah, we need to get balance back in here. So, yeah, if anything y'all get to today, I want you to know you're an equal with that giver. You are not, you know, I think the video was like, they don't trust me. There were other things where, you know, we think they're less than us just because we have money. We are equals, and you guys are smart people. So
I was just going to add on to your name, but this your comment. We realized a long time ago that in the beginning it was like we were asking for a transaction. We thought we had the greatest need to present, and it was up to you to transact with us to give. But instead we flipped it, and we realized that God cared just as much about the orphan as He does about the donor. He doesn't care about one more than the other. And so why would we not want to invest in the donor as much as we invest in the orphan and vulnerable child? So it changed our mindset many years ago, but it does then turn it into a blessing rather than a...
What does investing in the donor look like for you?
For us, we relationally invest in the donor. We pray for the donor. We each carry a caseload of each of our donors so that we're managing those relationships, but in an investment kind of way. Sometimes just a quick text, you know, to say, hey, how you doing? We just really believe that part of our ministry is ministering to those who invest in us, and then also investing in the orphans and all the children.
Wow. Is that who? You can't do that to everyone, though, can you?
Well, we do it to most of our top givers. So for sure, we say curious, interested, educated advocate, or advocates and educated groups are the ones that we spend a significant amount of time investing in. The ones who give, you know, what we call like a movement donation, we don't have the time or energy. They're getting the email thank you and stuff, but but we.
But as you're seeing people move into this orbit, like deeper into understanding your organization, then you have that ability to give them more time.
Yeah, we split that amongst our leadership, so it's not just on one or two people. It's across the.
That's great too. I mean, that's probably a different model than most of you too, right? It falls on your shoulders, right? To do that. So splitting it up among people. Okay, so I'm gonna just along the line here. Rob came up with something called Dan. So as you're moving through helping people with discovery, so you know, as they're friends and you're moving them, you know, friends, you might do the nice email return, thank you, but hopefully everyone's on a discovery path with you. So your communications, you know, just like my friend with Crew in inner city Chicago, I don't read every month, but pretty much every month that comes, I read it. Like 16 years later, it's that simple, but it's that good, you know, and it's kept me there. And in fact, just last week I answered the phone, and it was him, you know, and at first I was like, oh shoot. But what I appreciated is he picked up the phone, because I've been a constant donor, we will do extra stuff, and he called me and asked me, you know, he's like, will you sponsor 50 of our Thanksgiving boxes, which I've gotten the monthly email or the monthly letter, you know, that explains the results of these boxes. And I'm like, of course we would love to do that. But he picked up the phone. I mean, he knew who he should pick. You know, he has a list, so he's not calling everyone. But he picked up the phone and had the guts, I think, which I think is what you all are kind of expressing because you're afraid of rejection. You have the guts to ask. And, you know, it's not going to happen every time. Your universe, not everyone's going to say yes in the universe. So, acquisitions, more in that, you know, so after discovery, it's how do you continue to keep people coming back? I think, you know, everyone's doing social media and ways to do that. And I think, I don't know, in my experience, I'm a very relational person. So those that we kind of swirl around in that relational aspect, it's really important that I have that. The one thing I was saying to someone earlier today was, I find it surprising. So, you know, we'll do grants and we'll do grants for a while with people. And then, like, I kind of will play games. It's kind of like junior high, I guess. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to see how long it is until that person emails me back. Because you can start to feel like you're taking, like you're just taken for granted. And I'm always surprised, like just to encourage y'all, when you have people that are interested in your ministry and you've acquired them, they've moved into your sphere, keep communicating with them. Don't take them for granted. That's going to build trust. You're going to be able to build, purpose and values into them and help them learn more about your ministry than not communicating with them. So again, when any of you that are on missionary support or whatever, right, when you head off, you get forgotten. I hate to say it, you do. And that's where I'm like, I'm sorry, I wish I had other answers. I wish that the giver was like calling Kimberly up, Kimberly, what's up? How are you doing today? Probably it's really hard to have moved to Bangkok, and like doing that on a regular basis, but y'all are gone and you're out of sight, right? And so the same with your ministries, like there's so many distractions in the world, and so it's that keeping up. Does anyone else? It's back to back, right?
Yeah.
Besides back to back, think they have a good program, or do they do that? Keeping up with donors?
Yeah, we keep up with donors. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you do it?
We have bigger ones, like some organizations and church leadership teams, or just individuals. So they get updates, newsletters. They also get the personal email or hard copy of that newsletter, as well as Facebook messages that everyone can be signed up, and Instagram. And if we do just fundraising, we just invite people personally to come, something like that.
Open houses.
Open houses?
Our board is in United States, so they bring
We are
us
from
to
Ukraine.
United States.
Ukraine, okay.
And we meet people who sponsor, who are our donors. So it's very important for them to see Ukrainians and
who do the actual work.
Yeah,
right.
hear from
So you
Ukraine.
provide them the opportunity to come and meet you all. And
Actually, we go there. And
oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, we make you come to us?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and also we have prayer circle. We ask people who wants to join prayer circle, and it's more often like different special news which they can pray about, and it keeps them connected to.
And then they get an update what happened after they pray.
Okay. Great. Anyone else?
We use WhatsApp as well.
WhatsApp?
WhatsApp because that's kind of personal.
Yeah, right.
Especially if it's coming from my phone.
Right.
And sometimes there might be a picture of a young girl that they are taking care of or meeting her budget. So I'll send a picture and just to show you what happened this month, or baby and mom are doing great, something like that. We're not allowed to share those pictures publicly, so we let them know that. But it just is the sense of
It's that personal.
It's the sense of very personal connection with them.
Right.
That seems to work.
Right.
We have like weekly prayer requests and updates. So we have a group like both in Switzerland who continuously, ask you like weekly prayer requests and updates and video calling. So I mean, the media communications have made it much more closer to the donor and receivers. In fact, so
good
transparency.
But can I say something to that? I think
Yeah.
one of the things that it's related to building trust that you talked about earlier. I think one of the things that a lot of us fail to do is we falsely manage expectations. Like we say like, oh, we'll do this, all these things, and the trap is at the beginning you can connect to everyone, and then as it goes, so like trying to tier your structure, and like these are things we can actually manage and not promise, because most donors aren't able to read the thing that you send every week, and they're not able to.
Right.
So what are the things that actually meet the donor's needs and you can actually deliver on a consistent basis? Because if you promise something and you can't deliver it because you're busy with payroll and you're busy with HR and you're busy with growing programs, and then it ruins trust. And so figuring out what can you actually manage and not over-promising that, because then the donor understands your world more, and I think we dishonor people, and then I think in terms of all of these Dans, like this is as just being just genuine around, hey, like this week I couldn't do it because this happened. People understand, but being transparent around why you didn't meet something that you were supposed to do.
I mean also
That's great.
some donors, like some are church based and some are business people. So business people mindset is quite different, and church based donors are like faith based. They understand, they believe, so there's trust. For businessmen, it's like a protocol. He has it set up, and you just need to do what he says.
Yeah.
Like the video that you showed. I think maybe the guy was a businessman.
Right.
Yeah.
So no, the video though was they had their American, right? And it cracks me up because that was like in 2011 or when that was posted on YouTube, and now that's like totally inappropriate, right? But it's one of those models, and but I think what I want to move into is, so how many of you are doing local fundraising? I don't do any grants anymore, or I do very few that don't have a local fundraising component in it, because I've run in. I mean, all I would hear is it's not possible. It's not possible. Well, it is possible. And so, how many of you do local fundraising?
5 local.
Oh, local, like within your city or your country? Wow, in your neighborhood. So let's see, how of your budget, who is raising locally more than half of your budget in the country where your ministry is working? Okay. So the rest are still receiving more than half of your budget from a non-local source. So what are the barriers there when we're talking about local? Because when we're talking sustainability, that's the heart of it.
I think for us, we live in a country that's 95% Buddhist, 4% Muslim, less than 1% Christian. So at first we thought, oh, this isn't going to work because Buddhists and Muslims aren't going to give to a Christian organization. And then I went to this Amora ceremony thing and found out that Thailand gives more money than almost any other country. Like, they're so good at giving because of their Buddhism practice, so giving to the temple. So I thought, oh, we need to tap into that. Like the whole giving good karma. But just tap into good karma. And so being creative, sorry if that offended anybody. But, so yeah, just now being braver to go out to corporations who normally give to Buddhist temples, because everybody gives to Buddhist temples. So how to direct them from where they are giving to something different. So it's been a unique challenge, but I think, yeah, we have some corporations that are interested. And
So you've gone out and made them friends.
Yes.
Right? So you've had to get them to get to that friend place before they would even try to check. So like, what would some of those things be? Because I think what I really want to reinforce here is, again, I think with good meaning intentions, money's coming from the West to run different programs, right? And it's time that it happens in country. The countries they're not poor.
There's one point here, that the conversion rate with US and India, right? If I'm going to go and raise 1,000 rupees in India, and if I just get the same $1,000 from US, I think the amount of effort that you put in and the amount of money that's going to come is going to be like really huge. So the effort that you put to kind of raise local resources with the amount, like India is a really poor country, and if you look at it, $1 is like 70 rupees. Right? So if you look at the conversion rate, the amount of effort you were to put to get some money from the US, even $1,000 would be like 70,000 Indian rupees. But 70,000 rupees in Indian rupees to be able to raise is a big amount of money even for, because the level of that is people are not there are not a lot of people who will give 70,000 rupees straight away. But $1,000 is not a big amount of money for somebody to give.
Right. Yes.
I think the biggest inhibitor is corruption. At least in the countries we serve, and
y'all are mostly in Latin America?
Well, we're in Mexico, Nigeria, India, Haiti, Dominican Republic. But and so with the corruption, I actually don't think the money's not there. I think the money is there. Yes. I think rich Mexicans are wealthy people look poor here in the United States. But so we've done a lot of fundraising locally, but we started mostly by recruiting local volunteers to build the trust. And so we held a little cumbre, or a little summit, to gather local volunteers. We build trust, we get them involved, they see firsthand what's going on, and then we can ask them for the resources. And in Mexico, we've raised lots of money because of that. It's been awesome.
And so in Mexico, lots of money would equate to how much of your budget?
About $100,000.
But like of a percentage?
Oh,
like half
well,
of your...
that's particular, 10%. 10%?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. But if you count human resources, the amount of volunteers, we have 100 regular volunteers at each of our sites in Mexico on an ongoing basis. That's invaluable. That's human people.
Well, right, all those people can enter that orbit, right?
Right.
I mean, not in a manipulative way, right? They're people, but they all become connected to what you're doing, and their passion can grow and be developed, right? Michelle?
Yeah, I think there's just a need for mind change in terms of, I agree, the amount of time that you invest and systems that you need to set in place in the countries for them to be able to raise funds. And I think there needs to be a shift, like a mind perspective change for the country offices to not always see the West as that's where we get our resources, but also to see the agency and, the capacity that local people have. Even though we live or we're serving in very desperate countries that are poor, we have always had a system within those countries of taking care of our needs, whether it's monetary, whether it's voluntary, whether it's them bringing a cup of rice of that. That's giving, and it's that we don't need to look at it as just, it's the dollar amount that we are counting. So I like that you're counting the amount of time people that are coming and giving of themselves, because that person is, you can have a graduate in Zimbabwe, I can have a graduate, master's degree graduate, coming and volunteer because he's got no work, but he has got somewhere to go do something, even though I can't pay him. That's something that you can really start building on, and I think our organizations, we need to kind of change how we view local fundraising and start also looking at systems that are our systems locally really built to be able to go and present the same things that we're doing here in the States. I mean, not here in the States, but what we're doing for the West. They're tools that we can start, giving our local offices to start implementing locally at the same level. So.
Yeah. You're going to have to be loud and project your voice.
I'm not doing something very big, but I was like more of giving. I never wanted to receive anything. I wanted to give. So when coming to counseling and I started writing books and all, this is what God did on my heart. What is that we can self-support ourselves and we can do something like we can support ourselves. So we started, God gave us this vision that we can have printing press and all over the year we can get all the news from outside, and that's how we can self-support others to print our books and do counseling activities wherever we want.
Nice.
And when you were talking about local fundraising, I've never been in this, and I don't have much contact with it. So I just texted a couple of my friends. It almost took 1.5 years for me to prepare my heart. All of a sudden, one night, God laid this on my heart. By 2 a.m. in the night, I woke up and I just texted an email to my friends. And I was so shocked. 20 people responded. I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
They responded positively to help.
Yes. Yeah, there are a few who haven't responded.
Sure.
But we a bit busy about it. Okay, am I is my mail operating and all? But there are people who respond after 2 minutes. Sorry, Kenny, I have got to text you and all.
Yeah. Simon. So I asked Simon to come today because Alliance for Children Everywhere, or Christian, it's all CACZ. In Lusaka, Zambia, in some of our grants, we've done it twice in a row now. When we've given, we've done matching grants, so 2 to 1 or whatever. So, but it's been larger numbers, like $10,000. And so, and to my surprise, the first time we did it, I think in 3 months, like they came back, and so, and it wasn't like $5 a banana, and all that. It was like $1,000, $1,200, it was like really surprising, and I think you all were surprised. So I just asked him to come and share a little bit about what they were doing, I think in advance, maybe knowingly or not, in preparation of doing local fundraising.
Yeah, it's been difficult, like I think she said. Zambia is a country which is really, really grappling with high levels of poverty. Like we're talking, I think 70 above percent somewhere there. Unemployment levels are really, really high. Pandemic of HIV is still like a big deal. And we have, of course, a few, people that can give, to good causes like what we are doing. And I think the past 5 years or so, I've seen it where donor funding, especially international, has really like dwindled, and that had to make us start thinking out of the box. And I think, thanks to Steve, we had that task for the first test, and it was to match the grant, which was about $10,000, and going back home, and I'm like, okay, what next? What do we do? With the team, of course, we prayed about it. We need to thank God for good donors that He set aside, to help that kind of activities. Just a few probably tricks, I'll call them. But these are good points that we used, to raise that. So within 2 months, we managed to match that grant of $10,000. It was one of a kind, and it was the first time ever. Because I think in my country, people would rather give in kind than,
They like giving out washing machines and
diapers,
bananas, right? Which is
cooking,
good.
Which is good. It impacts the budget, of course. It does, but you need something for staff.
I mean, right? If we were gone and he needs to pay his salary somehow. I'm kidding,
So
but it's real.
We started with this, of course, building trust. It's number one thing, and people just have to know what you are doing, how you are doing it. I don't know, but they need to know how you are doing it as well.
But how are you doing that? You were
so
already doing that before the grant, right?
Yeah, we were trying. It was hard, like to really raise locally, but we managed a few here and there, especially the maybe local and international banks. But we also have some local banks run by Zambians, and they will visit. But usually what we will do is we have something we call meet and greet events. We do them every month sometimes, but it's a quarterly thing. So here we connect and reconnect with those people that God has really given us to help the week. We don't want to connect with them like Steve said earlier on, they give us and then we cut them. So we connect and reconnect. So they will come to the center, or maybe we'll go with them to the field to just showcase what we do. And they'll come. We allow them to even invite their friends or invite their colleagues or whoever they know, who can help. And before they go back to their offices or to their homes, there will be all these, pledges being made. And we also use everyone today in Zambia wants to be fit. Actually, the president has made it clear to everyone that every Friday we have to go and run. Ladies are doing their aerobics. So we use such events like, let's do it for the children. And everyone will come, 1,000 people will come. And during the breaks, when they're drinking their water, we talk about what we do. And before we finish the whatever sporting event, and they walk out, people are pledging, and we just follow through to collect. What's the other one? Yeah, end of the year, everyone wants to celebrate anniversaries. So we also use that, just to invite all those donors that help, cover some of our expenses during the year. And we make sure that with the relationship that we build with the government, the trust, I think the cooperation and the transparency in this relationship building has really, really helped us. So we have some good people that really come to that event. And that one, usually they give cash. Some will say, okay, I can write a check. People will give me that check and they'll write. And within, actually that night, we raised more than the matching grant of 10,000. You can imagine that. So we had even extra. So it was 3 times. Because we tell them, look, you guys, you're going to have to help us here. We have this person who wants to give us $10,000. But for us to get it, we need your help. So we need to raise another 10,000. And we'll tabulate with this person. They love transparency. So we tell them this person is based in the US and this is what they do. And they're just good like that. They have this heart to give to the children, especially the vulnerable children. And because of that, they'll say, okay, let's show them that we can raise it. And we raise it together. Like it even exceeds what we, the task that we were supposed to arrive at. So those are a few, I think, strategies that we are using currently. But to be honest, it doesn't get easy. But we will pray every day that God sets aside people that can understand. But I think it's very important that people get to know what we do.
So, question. Have you felt like you've developed a fundraising arm within your ministry now?
I would say yes, we just need to improve on. Because right now, actually, those people, they'll come without even inviting them. They'll just come through and say, you guys need something that we can do for you. Usually we have challenges in terms of course, buying food. It's really expensive. I think we are spending, like, for a child, it's a transit home, by the way, it's not an orphanage, but sometimes they stay for long because of all these, legal issues with the government. So we're spending like probably $300 to $400 per child, and depending on how many, sometimes there'll be 70, 80 children. So when they come in, we explain as it is. Right now, the prices of groceries or food, they've skyrocketed in the past 4 or 5 months. Crazy. Something that we are getting for $5, maybe it's about $15 now. So they see the struggle, and because we also share how we use that money, I think they love it that way, so they'll still end up giving.
So you're communicating back to us.
Exactly, yeah.
That's great.
But I don't think they have a developed, a donor department necessarily. I think from what I've understood, it's really like an ethos change, right?
Exactly.
So all of you are able to speak. All of you on staff are able to speak to people about the needs and to bring in funds, I guess.
Yeah, last year we did a training from all of our staff on like asking for money from locals, and it was really fun to see. I mean, a couple of our staff who work at the Child Development Center, they had never thought about this, and so they went to the local company for Christmas and said, we need this, this, and this, can you help us? And it was the first time they went out of their comfort zone to the company down the road and said, we're having a Christmas party, would you like to give? And I think they were really proud of themselves, but again, we're just starting to move in that direction.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
That's great.
So you have someone that's a funder in the room in front of you. I'm just going to open it up for questions. Do y'all have questions of me or, anything we discussed in, local fundraising? Do people think that's a good idea? Should, anything?
One thing I can share.
Yeah.
Bangladesh is a poor country and Muslims. But in Dinaspo, we have a project, and nearby we have a neighbor. He's a Haji, he went to Saudi Arabia and do the Haji. And he have a bricks field. He used a lot of children work around the field.
In his bricks.
So we went to about working with child right project things, and slowly will build the relationship, and he reduced all those things. Finally, the things happened. Last year, we built a school building, and he actually donated 10,000 bricks. And he's not a believer, he's not anything, but 3 years his motivation changed, and now he become like one of our ambassador, like he advocate on behalf of. He's like a business alliance, but he's not literate even though, very uneducated, but he's wealthy man. He has many money, you cannot imagine. As a Bangladeshi, he has more than 11 business, like brick field, he have a recycling business, then he have a truck, and he have a rice husking mill, all those things. But I saw that now if we can motivate that type of local men, even not believers, they can easily, like how my brother says that they like to see the children are helped. And that's happening in many ways. And then maybe Lawrence was one man named Albert Schulen model. He was a cooperative president for a big, what do you call, a small savings group. So he's involved with our ministry. And last year he gave like around $5,000 equivalent money for another project. He went with us, he saw that, he helped to build a church building as well. And he says, God bless me in many ways. So the things you say is that when people see that we are doing something, and if they are very close by, then they can help. And I know another Muslim organization in Dhaka, they are working, and some bakeries, they make the cookies and other things. And evening, they're donating many of the cookies to their street children project. And my friend says that now they are not raising any money for buying cookies or other things, because several bakeries, they are giving. So I think this is possible to mobilize the local resources.
That's great, and that's even not among the church.
Yeah, not because
that's ministry in itself, right?
I don't know other country, but in my country, basically inside the church there is not much money, because very few believers and most of the poor people they converted. We have some businessmen rich, but they are not very much giving. But non-Christian people have a lot of money, and we are taking a strategy from them how they make the most. They take a money, go to the street, and ask the money to give it. If they can make their own mosque, and when they convert it, why not they can help us to make the real church? So that is strategy we are using now.
Wow. Yeah.
I like what you said, that you are robbing your fellow Filipinos or fellow Indians of the opportunity part of what God is doing. I like that. I'm starting to do this kind of fundraising, but we had a talk a while ago. Why don't you ask West? We Filipino, we are really tempted to do that. I am tempted to do that because I know some people there. But again, how about my people? They are helping. I like that statement. That's why right now I'm a new in this arena, but I really want my fellow Filipinos to be part of what I'm doing. When I visited the church, the pastor of the church, because I have a mission trip this November, so I was given the chance, the opportunity to promote actually the Orphan Sunday, not the mission trip that I'm going to do. But the pastor, after I speak about Orphan Sunday, he got up on the stage and told the people that this family will be going to Mindanao. Then we explained a little bit about the mission trip, and they put a box at the back. And I saw this young lady, I think she's a single mom, and he has 20 pesos. He puts it in the box. When I saw that, it gives me hope for her. Because the Filipinos are not really poor, because I went to a community. They said it's a poor community, but people there has beautiful cell phone than I have, motorcycle, washing machines, and this beautiful stuff. So I told the community organizers there, your community is not poor. But again, what I'm trying to say is that I think just giving them the opportunity to be part of what it doesn't matter if it's small, if it's big. And I think the time that we spend giving follow-ups or updates to the big donor, it should be the same amount of time we spend with those who give small amount. I think that's just my learning for this thing.
Thanks for sharing.
Yes, let's connect to what you say. I think in Zambia there is a community of Indians. We have a lot of Indians in Zambia. And I think they've started coming. I like what he said. You know, they've started coming, and we can't be like saying, you know, they bring in cash, like in their small way. For us, I think respect them. Even when we do those meet and greet events, we don't really like just target those who brought big things, but even the young Indians who kind of want something to now, like, you know, giving their small and they're all encouraged to be part of what.
Well, has anyone seen the Mizoram people's video about the handful of rice? Pearl Ganta here was the producer of that. But it's a church in the northeast of India and a very poor community area. And the concept was every time you cook a meal, you take a handful of rice and you stick it in a bucket on the side. And then that bucket fills up, and the women would bring that bucket to church, and they had a rice bin at the church that they collected their handful of rice, right?
We do that in Jharkhand as well.
Yeah.
All the churches, all the women, they bring it on Sunday, then they auction it off, and the money goes back.
Right, so they resell it, right, back into the community. Well, I don't know what the current amount is that they raise every year. Guess how much that church raises every year to go to missions, to send people out on missions. Guess how much? In your poor country where, you know, they can't do it. $1 million a year to a handful of rice. So it's there. And yeah, I just want to encourage y'all to, I'm going to say tap into that, but that sounds very cold and impersonal, but I really want to encourage y'all to look at your places where you're working and know that there are people there that can and should be pulled into that. And I think it's figuring out how do you nurture, how do you pull them into your orbit and get them connected. And 10 rupees or $5, like, you're doing a service to your community by doing that.
Could you talk to us about the risk of having a donor or like a couple donors, and like, or maybe potentially the value of a diversity of donors?
Well, sure. Most donors are going to add, like our policy is, for the most part, we won't give over 10% of your budget. So we're always asking the budget. So of course, it's kind of a bummer. If you've got a smaller budget, you get a smaller, potentially a smaller check. But no, I think, do you think many people are that cattywampus?
Well, the reason why I ask is I think when I come to a lot of these conferences and just generally you're looking for like a home run. You know, if I have like $20,000, right? If I have a $20,000 budget, and if I get somebody who's willing to give me $20,000,
I'm like,
because churches, there are organizations and people that they like being there are donors still. I think it's your strategy is really wise, but like I think there are donors and churches in America in particular who like to be kind of the owner of the project.
Right.
And then, so if you have a $20,000 gap, and then you get somebody to give you $20,000, there are some donors who rightly are like, well, don't you want to grow that? Like, I gave you $20,000, and you're basically just saying, like, I'm done.
Right.
And you could say, we gave you a jump start, and in 3 years, your strategy might change. Like, or we can't operate in this country now, or our shifts, and if we haven't built other relationships, then we're stuck, you know? And so I think the value of diversity and being clear on why you're called to do it is really important.
The thing, so the big grant, magic bullet. Most of us won't even do. But I mean, like, a a lot of grantors, you know, at a larger dollar level will do a year, take a year off for sure.
Right.
Maybe you'll come back. For us, we used to have a rule that we had to have 40% new organizations in every board meeting. Well, guess what? Once you get a grant from us, it's kind of sucky because you're in this bigger pool that just kind of keeps getting bigger. So, but we were constantly trying to learn and build. We're not doing that anymore. But right, all of a sudden you have a person that maybe gets annoyed with, you know, doesn't agree with you anymore, whatever, pulls out, and all of a sudden your whole, you all know this, you collapse. And so that diversity, the people, but I think, you know, also the world is changing, and we're seeing countries closing. We're seeing, I mean, India, like, we have no idea how much longer we're going to be able to get funds into India, right? In fact, I'm going to India in 2 weeks, and I was like, I mean, I'm hearing these things, and I'm like, please give me my visa, you know, and I got it, by the way. But you know, we're having to figure out how to move money around, and if all of a sudden China closes, India closes, well, how are you going to run your ministry that God's called you to if you haven't activated the church that, you know, a lot that you're working with already, and you're depriving the church? And I know some of this is cultural, right? I know some of it's fear, and again, I get to sit on this side, and it's easier, I know, but it's how do you overcome and look at fundraising in a different way, in an integral, spiritual exchange between you and the giver. And it's not all, you know, you can't do that personally with everyone, but it really is a spiritual exchange between us.
So just in the last couple of years, we fill out a lot of grant applications, or work with churches to fill out applications to be partners with them. I had this that all of a sudden, why am I answering all the questions for them? What questions should I be asking them? And so who are we, this might sound crass, getting in bed with in a partnership or a relationship? And so we started asking our donors more questions before they actually invest in us, and even our church partners. And so we actually have a pretty good filter for even church partnerships, because we don't want to just be anybody's mule. And I would encourage everybody here to do the same, not in a crass way, but in a real, like, who are you partnering with? Who are you saying? So my question for you is, what questions do you want to be asked?
Oh gosh. Well, you know what I wish? That people would just be honest. I don't want to feel like when I'm asking for a grant that people are wanting to hear what they want me to tell them. I want pushback. Maybe I'm different that way, but if this is a relationship, I want, you know, if I'm like, hey, this project, you know, I want you to say, well, that's actually project 99 on my list, and I actually have 3 that are, you know, really more important, and risk, like, well, maybe the top 3 don't align with where I'm needing to go, but you're willing to risk that, and that really builds trust for me.
Yeah, that's great. That's good.
Yeah.
How many in here about a healthy board?
Yeah.
How many out there?
Oh gosh. Well, there's like a chapter, and Rob talks about an orbit and all that. And actually, if anyone wants to leave me, or I'm steve@firstfruit.org. You can email me, but the McClellan Foundation and Triaxia have come up with a great board training kind of manual, and I just signed an MOU with them that I can share that. But it was developed with IFES, which is a international arm of InterVarsity, basically. And they found that when they had healthy instances of their program in a city, their board was healthy. So the board chairman actually showed up and worked, didn't just pray and leave. You know, so there's a whole, like, they kind of have a workbook of things, of what it means to be a board, and how that board supports the executive director in their work. So, yeah, I mean, if y'all want to email me that, I can forward you that information. It's not really my area of expertise, I'll say. But it is important. And you know, like, in some countries, family members are on boards, and you know, so there's good practice of, it's not a family business. It's you know, these people are here to, if you're the executive director, to perhaps fire you, but that's not the reason. But you know, it should be a good a good tension, relationship, accountability. Yeah. So anything else? Any other? Did we cover fears? Did I hopefully motivate you or excite you to get out there and like ask for money and
So you're gonna fund everybody here for $100,000 each?
Yeah. I have my Monopoly money. I believe anything else, right? No, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, I go to conferences and stuff, and sometimes I do feel like a chunk of meat, and I feel like people just want to get to know me, or I'm a friendly person, and and that can be painful too. I'm like, man, I'm more than just the funds, right? I have experiences. I've bebopped all around the world because that's what I'm paid to do, to see different things. And I think that God's used that in my life to be able to share some experiences more than money. Trust me, there are more people doing good around the world that I wish we could just write checks for, but my in-laws didn't make enough money, for me to give away. So, but I don't even think if they were billing Melinda Gates with $5 billion, we'd have enough money. You know what I mean? So but just remember too, the donor can feel, like that wall, like we're just looked at as a wall. And you know what? Some donors, that's how they're going to act, and they're actually jerks anyway. And you should just walk on and try not to have your feelings hurt. But I think for the most part, most donors really want to do good, and they want to have a relationship. And so slow down and take the time to do that.
So, initially I listened from you that you deserve some people who are familiar to you, to whom you trust very much as a donor.
Yes.
So, when I experienced the grassroots situation, on priority basis, those who are most neglected, they will be getting neglected by your choices because they are not known to you.
I know, but that's where I'd say, go ahead.
Yes, please. So, how rationally or spiritually to justify that you're neglecting them is right to you?
So first fruit, one of our passions is more grassroots. So we would talk about people around the fringes, not just, in India I could find Richard Howell or Alex Phillip or, name all the names that are more internationally known, right? And yeah, we funded them. But finding the people around the fringes, that's why we have 40% of our grants had to be new to us, because we were constantly looking for people like that. But I think what I would push back, again, is what I'm saying here is, look, you need to also find people in your country. Yeah, American dollars or Western funds are good. Buildings need to be built. And there are bigger things that raising 10 rupees at a time is going to take forever to do, right? And that's part of this communion between us. I mean, our money, we shouldn't just keep it all to ourselves. We are called to give it, right? But I think
because we are working in remote areas and we are not known to anybody. We rely with our own.
So why haven't you contacted churches or churches in bigger cities?
We are raising fund locally.
Okay.
Like different sphere of areas. We immediately take care of those who are affinity responders. We have kept children, and they are mostly travel children. And we go to the tribal people and ask them that this is your children belongs to your community, your caste, so you have to take care of them first. So they are coming forward. Secondly, the friend circle, when I have so many friends, I share this message, and out of my maybe good work or facial value, if they trust me,
right,
they help our children.
Yeah.
And thirdly, the grocery where I take the ration for my children, the grocery shops, they also help us.
Awesome.
And the hotels, I have some good relation with the hotels. They also provide clothes freely, like star hotels. Star hotels for the children.
So what would you, I mean, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying I'm not finding you, or I'm maybe not looking, right?
Okay.
So what would you, like, I would applaud you for what you're doing. I know it's hard work, but I would almost be afraid by me coming, by a outside funder coming in, it would destroy the model that you've set up, because all of a sudden there's a larger dollar of money that you believe you want that's going to somehow mess up what you've established, which actually sounds like a beautiful way to do ministry. You have your community involved in it.
And churches are also invited, churches.
Right.
The families, those who are affluent families, they are also giving a little bit for the children. So how long? It is a single time and once in a while they give it. So when we see about the long run in a sustainable manner, then we think about the donors like you people. But again, we are dealing with your own choices and preferences. There we are sufferers.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Help me out.
Yeah, there's a great resource, When Charity Destroys Dignity, and looking at particularly around church-related projects, both what a church could manage and keep track of. So, like if a church is bringing in, let's say, $500 over the course of the year, and then somebody comes in and gives $10,000, sure, something gets done in the short run, but then those people who were giving that $500 never give that money again. And so that project is done, but then the next 20 years, that church can no longer give $500, and people start volunteering.
They're kind of like, what was my $500?
Let's just find another donor. And so in terms of the spiritual, if we believe that stewardship and financial stewardship is about honoring the Lord, who are we to deny people to give the opportunity? And it's not just about getting the project done. It's I have a responsibility as a donor, or as a giver in my own church. But as a donor, if I give this money, I'm partly at fault if that church then stops giving. Like I've created an environment where they no longer feel they need to be obedient to God. And so it's how much a church can manage. So like you said, 10%. Like we try it for Adam Voices to not give more than that church can actually manage or ever replace. So yeah, there might be $100,000 of need, but if they can manage 1,000, and even if we only give them 2, we create an environment where they can't be good stewards of that, and they can never replace that money. And so it's when it comes, particularly when Charity Destroys Dignity, it looks at like particularly when it involves a church-related project. It's that church's responsibility to do that, not just practically, but spiritually. So when Charity Destroys Dignity, it's a great resource on the theology of giving.
Yeah. I think of that church, your church that had $2.
Yeah, 3 hours every week that they were praying and discerning.
Yeah, and any of us could have come in and slipped 20 in there, or
That's
100, right? And what would that have done to those people that their widows might, really,
and
right?
the data suggests that any outside giver, almost always that leads to a decrease in generosity and a decrease of volunteering. That will never be replaced. That will never be replaced. Not like there's a pause, but it will never be replaced. Because then people are like, well, let's just find another person. And then everybody spends all their time worrying about outside, and then they don't say, the fishes and loaves that God's given me, what should I do? And it's a reality. Yeah.
Finish or one more?
No, we're good. I'm going to wrap it up.
I think if I understand what my brother trying to say, like, whom we are not, I say, highly leaders or not well-known people, sometimes finding for them fund is very difficult because no reference. And mostly who are in the national level leaders who are with the big organizations like IFS movement, Lausanne movement, Swiss movement, they have references. So when they apply for the grant, it's local or international, it doesn't matter. They are highly chosen by the donor side, also by the giver side. They thought, okay, this is the people we want to give because they have a reputations, but who are very isolated area working. If I understand clearly, yes, that is his question. Like, how can we overcome that type of situation? Or what would be the suggestion? How can we find the reference? How can we tell people that, oh, we are really doing good? Because same thing happened to me. Like many times, we are very good in work, but we are very less funny. Why? Because we don't know much people. We don't have much connections. Where we go, even we don't have much opportunity to attend that kind of conferences. But people, some people, they have whole year opportunity to go many places and know many people. Like, as a whole context, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Then it's not a question of local or international. It's a question like, how can we help the people who need it? If I understand, that's my point.
On priority, why and most neglected can be helped out on priority. That is my conviction. It is not my choice and request even. It is my conviction because I come from a sociolog background. We help the people to help themselves.
Yeah.
We don't help the government to help the government and make another government. We help a person to help himself or herself.
Yeah.
The lowest standard at his doorstep.
Yeah.
So there we are suffering. We are struggling.
Yeah. I don't have the answer for you. I don't know. I mean, because I'll tell you, we know this conference, they're just at conferences all the time, and they're traveling around to fundraise all the time. And honestly, I mean, I'm going to say, I don't have as much trust necessarily. I have, it adds a question mark in my mind of that person. Like, so how do you're raising all this money so you can bebop around the world, you know? I've got funders that are doing this for me to bebop around the world, and you're not necessarily here to learn, you know? You're here to fundraise.
I was just gonna say, and God knows, right? Like there are people, exactly what you're saying, Steve. Like God knows, and there are people who are serial fundraisers. They're incredibly successful, and the whole community looks up to them and is like, wow, I want to be like that person. But I have found very few times where that person who's super good at fundraising is wildly out of the ordinary of where they've come from, is building actual good kingdom fruit.
Yeah.
And there's God is not asking us to build warehouses. He's asking us to be faithful with the little that he's given. And so just like you were saying, Sue, like honor the people who have the $1 to give or the 50 cents to give, because those people in the eyes of the Lord, there's this passage in Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 24, where it's like in heaven, even the kings will have to answer to what they've been given. You know, God's economy is different. So don't look down upon the person who says, here's what I have to give. Here's my cup of rice. You know, because in the economy of scale, Bill Gates and that woman with a cup of rice are the same, and they both have to answer. And that's what God's about. He's not trying to build fortresses. He's asking for our obedience. So those people who raise a lot of money, they're not our mark to emulate.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, on that, we're 10 minutes over. So God, go with everyone, remove fear, and give them power. Yeah, no, grab whatever books you want, and share them, please.